This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
The Yerushalmi tells us that David HaMelech was born on Shavuos. And we have a tradition that tzaddikim, they pass away on the same day that they were born. Hashem is Yimali, Shnaisem, Shel Tzaddikim, Miyam Liyam, Mishana L'Shana. So Shavuos is the birthday of David HaMelech. It's the yard site of David HaMelech. So, as the Navi says, we want to know, Madu alay ba ben Yishai gam hayom, gam tamol gam hayom. Where is he? When's he coming? Right? When is Mashiach coming? The topic that we're going to be addressing this morning is determining the date of Mashiach's arrival. Okay? So whatever we say over here, it's just between us, right? Between me and you, and all the Torah Anytime viewers, but nobody else, right? This is a topic of determining the date of Mashiach's arrival. Are we allowed to? So let's give it our best shot. And this is a topic that's very close to my heart, because the Medrash tells us. Look at number 1. Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rabbi Elazar bar Avina. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Elazar bar Avina, Shnei b'nei Adam nigla lahem ha'ketz. There are 2 individuals in history, throughout our history. There are only 2 people who knew when Mashiach was coming. However, even these 2 individuals, v'chazar v'neskas mehem, even these people, after they knew the information, it was hidden from them. Ve'eluhem, these are them, Yaakov and Daniel. Daniel, how do you know? The pasuk says in Daniel in Parak Yud Beis, Ve'ata Daniel sisoim hadvar b'chasoim. Hashem tells Daniel, conceal the matter and seal it. Right? So in other words, even though Daniel had the information, God hid it from him. Yaakov Avinu es asher yikra eschem b'achras hayamim. Yaakov Avinu tells his children, he gather, and I'm going to tell you what's going to be b'achras hayamim. And then he goes on to say what? Reuven b'choy riyata. He gives them a bracha. Wait a second. One second. Yaakov Avinu says, Heyasvu ve'agida lachem eis asher yikra eschem b'achras hayamim. Gather together. I'm going to tell you what's going to be at the end of days. And he doesn't say a word about it, right? He starts telling them completely different matters. He says, Reuven b'choy riyata. What do we see from here? Says the Medrash, Melamed Shaba Legalois Lahem Es HaKetz. This teaches that Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal the end. V'niskasa mimenu was hidden from him. So the 2 individuals who knew when Mashiach was coming were Yaakov and Daniel. So probably I'm the last person who should be giving a share on this topic, right?
You're Daniel.
Considering my name is Daniel Yaakov.
Are you going to reveal it?
I'm saying I'm the last guy in the world to be giving it to share on the 2 people who was hidden from them. But what can we do? Okay. So let's just learn a little bit. What does it mean that the Yaakov Avinu knew exactly when Mashiach was coming and was hidden from him? So if you look in Parshas Vayechi, Vayikra Yaakov el banav, Yaakov calls his children, Vayomer heyasvu v'agida lachem. He says, gather together and I will tell you, Eis asher yikra eschem b'achras hayamim. So Rashi says, Bikesh legalois es haketz. He wanted to reveal the end. V'nestalka mimenu shchina. And the Shekhinah departed. V'hischal omer dvar macherim. And he started telling them different things.
Did Kodesh Baruch Hu tell him not to reveal the case? I mean, if he told him what the case was, or gave him, by Ruach HaKodesh...
No, he didn't tell him not to. He left him, so he no longer had access to that information.
He didn't know that he wasn't allowed to do it.
No, it doesn't say he wasn't allowed to. He didn't know it anymore. It was hidden from him. And in fact, if you look in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi, Vayechi Yaakov, Rashi says, if you notice, Vayechi is what we call Sasam Lagamri. There is no space at all in between the end of Vayigash and the beginning of other Parshios, right? Normally a Parsha begins on the next line. With Pez and Samach, sometimes, there's a four letter space. But between Vayigash and Vayechi, there's no space at all. There's just like any letter, like the next word, right? Lama Parshazu Sesuma. Why is Vayechi Sesuma? Lefi Shekivan Shen Niftar Yaakov Avinu. So the first pshat of Rashi is when Yaakov Avinu passed away, the eyes and hearts of Bnei Yisrael were sealed, were clogged up. What does Rashi say in the Davar Acher? Shebikesh legalois es haketz lebanav. Yaakov Avinu wanted to tell Klal Yisrael when Mashiach was coming. V'nistam mimenu, it was sealed up, it was clogged up. The fact that this parsha is closed up indicates that this was information that was closed up, clogged up, removed from Yaakov Avinu. The Gemara Masechta Pesachim elaborates further. The Gemara says like this: Look in number 5. The Amar Shimon Lakish. Vayikru Yaakov el banav vayomer he'asvu ve'agidu lachem. Says the Gemara. Bikesh Yaakov legalois levanav ketz hayamin. Yaakov wanted to reveal the end. V'nestalka mimenu shchina. And the shchina departed. Now Yaakov Avinu, he's about to give the date. He's about to say 2,000, right? And he loses it. He loses information. So Yaakov Avinu, he's wondering, what's going on? Why is Hashem leaving me? Maybe one of my children, maybe, one of them, there's something wrong with them. Maybe one of them is a rasha. Maybe one of them is unworthy. Yaakov Avinu said, Amar, Shemachas Hashem yesh b'mitasei psul. Maybe in my family there is some kind of disqualification. And this would not be something that is out of the ordinary for our family. Avram Avinu, Ka'avram, Shiatz Menu Yishmael. Yishmael came from Avram Avinu. Va'avi Yitzchak, right? Va'avi Yitzchak, and my father Yitzchak, Shiatz Menu Esav. Esav came out, so maybe I have one of those kinds. Amru Lai Banav. So Yaakov Avinu's children said to him, No. You have nothing to worry about. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. In other words, Shema Yisrael, what does that mean? Listen, Yaakov! Right? Yaakov's name was Yisrael. Listen, Yaakov! Hashem, our God, Hashem is one. In other words, Amru, they meant to say, Kishem she'ein belibcha ela echad. Just like in your heart, you only believe in one God, Kach ein belibeinu ela echad. In our heart, all of us together, we believe in the same God. So what did Yaakov Avinu respond? Ba'is Rasha, at that time, Pasach Yaakov Avinu va'amar, Baruch, Shem, Kevod, Ma'achusai, Li'olam va'ed. It's the Gemara in Pesachim. Again, Yaakov wants to say to his children when Mashiach's coming, he's about to say the date, the Shechina leaves him, he's worried maybe it's because one of his children are disqualified. The kids say no, Shema Yisrael, Herzechain Yaakov Avinu, Herzechain the Tata. Just like you only believe in one God, we believe in one God, whereupon Yaakov Avinu responded, what? Baruch Shem Kvod Ma'achusai Li'olam va'ed. Okay, now we have to look very carefully at the Rambam. Because the Rambam basically says over this Gemara, but slightly differently. Okay? Look at number 6. HaKorei Kriya Shema. One who reads Kriya Shema, Kishu Gomer Pasuk Rishon, and after he finishes the first Pasuk, Omer, says the Rambam, you say the following. Omer Belachash, say quietly, Baruch Shem Kvod Ma'achus Li'olam va'ed. And then, v'choizer v'kari kedaka, then you go back to what it says in the Torah of Yohavta, Eis Hashem L'kecha ad Seifa. V'lo makarin kain, why would we do this, right? Raise your hand. True or false? Baruch Shem Kvod Ma'achus Li'olam va'ed appears in the Chumash.
Yeah, but not there.
It's what the Bnei Yisrael said.
True or false? Baruch Shem Kvod Ma'achus is a pasuk in the Chumash.
It does not appear
It's
in
false.
the Chumash.
No, it doesn't appear in the Chumash. So, Avi's question is, what?
And it doesn't say in Chumash that the children said Shema Yisrael.
No. It's Shema Yisrael is in Vaschana, right? So the Rambam wants to, why in the world would we interrupt what it says in the Torah, Shema Yisrael, V'after, with some Baruch Shem? It's not a pasuk. The answer is it's because we have a tradition through the Torah Shabbat Peh that Shema Yisrael was said by the Shvatim to their father. Their father responded Baruch Shem, and based on this tradition, it is our custom to say this, right? The Rambam says, "V'lo makarin kain." Why do we do this? Mesayras hi biyadenu. It's our tradition, right? Like the Gemara says, "Shebeshasha kibetz Yaakov Avinu espanav b'Mitzrayim." When Yaakov gathered his children in Mitzrayim, b'shas misasai. Look carefully. I would have said what? What did Yaakov Avinu want to tell his children? Mashiach, says the Rambam, Tzivam v'zirzam al yichud Hashem. He commanded them, and he warned them, and he reminded them, and he gave them a energetic warning, al yichud Hashem, that there's one God. V'al derech Hashem shehalach ba'Avram v'Yitzchak Aviv. And he told them about the path of God that Abraham had walked and Yitzchak had walked. And he asked them, and he said, 1 second, is there someone over here who's unworthy? Maybe there's someone here that doesn't agree with me. As Moshe Rabbeinu said to Klal Yisrael, Pen yesh b'chem isha yisha. And what did they respond? Anu kulam v'yamru, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Kolaymar, meaning to say, Shema mimenu avinu Yisrael. Listen from us, our dear Father. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Pasach Hazakim ve'Amar. So Yaakov responded, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusah L'Olam Va'ed. Lefikach, therefore, Nohagu Kol Yisrael Loimar Shavach Sheshibach Bo Yisrael Hazakin Achar Pasuk Zeh.
So why do we say quietly?
Because on the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say it. So to say something out loud that Moshe didn't say, it's a little bit of a design for Moshe. So the compromise is, on the one hand, Yaakov said it, on the one hand, Moshe didn't say it, so we take the middle road, we say it quietly. Except on Yom Kippur. You see, okay, Yom Kippur is a little bit of a different issue, because we say it out loud even not in the context of Shema. Okay. Rabbi said, what is the obvious problem on the Rambam? Again, the Rambam says that what did Yaakov Avinu do b'shas misastim?
He said Shema Yisrael instead.
He warned, what does the Rambam say? Sivam v'zirzam al yichud Hashem. He commanded them and warned them that there's one God. Where did the Rambam get that from? That's not what the Gemara says. What the Gemara says is that Yaakov Avinu wanted to tell Klal Yisrael when Mashiach is coming. If you look in the Gemara Psachim that we learned, the Gemara Psachim says Yaakov Avinu didn't say a word to them about Yichud Hashem. He just said, I want to tell you when Mashiach is coming. Mashiach is coming in the year, and he lost it. He didn't have it anymore. Doesn't say anything that he wanted to tell them that Yichud Hashem, that one God. Doesn't say that.
But it says the Agidu Lachem is Asher Yikra is going to be Achos Hayam.
Yeah.
That's what the pasuk said.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's going to be at the end.
One time, when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the Hashem Echad means to say that in the Achros Hayamim, all of the Goyim will accept that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Echad. So when you read into this, that he's going to tell them what's going to happen in Achros Hayamim, that Hashem is going to be one, and that's the Shema Yisrael. It's the same thing.
Very good. Very good. I would like to say that. I was going to say that.
I'm sorry.
No.
You taught us that one time.
We did. Very good. Good. But first we're going to read the question of the Kesef Mishnah and then the answer of Reb Shach. And then we're going to offer our own suggestion. The Kesef Mishnah asks the following question, the question we raised. Look at number 7. There's a question we could ask on the language of the Rambam. Shekasav, the Rambam writes, Shebishah shekibetz Yaakov, when Yaakov gathered his children, Tzivam v'zirzam al yichud Hashem, he commanded them and warned them about the uniqueness and oneness of God. V'zeloi matzinu shehuskar b'Gemara. The Gemara doesn't mention that. Elo shebikesh l'gales ketz hayamin. The Gemara says Yaakov Avinu wanted to tell them when Mashiach is coming. Where does the Rambam see in that he wanted to tell them exactly, he wanted to tell them about the oneness of God? So Rav Shach, in his commentary on the Rambam, called Avi Ezri, the Rav Shach tells us a very important thing. Rav Shach says, what difference does it make when Mashiach is coming? What's the difference? How does that affect our lives? That we're gonna live differently? Let's say Mashiach is coming 5 years, 10 years, or tomorrow. What's the difference? What's the difference? Who cares? Really?
Well, if you knew he was coming tomorrow, we'd be packing it.
If you knew he's coming tomorrow, then you might actually daven mincha with some kavanah. Right? And you might prepare yourself. You might, stop speaking Lashon Hara. You might improve. You might be mizariz yourself in Avodas Hashem. But practically, what's going to have doesn't make a difference in a person's life. Does a Shulchan Aruch change? No. Is anything you have to do differently? No. You have the same obligations. The only nafkamina of knowing when Mashiach is coming is, it's a zeros. It's something that energizes you. It's something that will wake you up in your service of Hashem. So if Shach says, where did the Rambam get that Yaakov Avinu was mazares them about the uniqueness of God? Exactly. Why else would he want to tell them when Mashiach is coming? The whole point of knowing when Mashiach is coming is only to be able to improve ourselves. So that's what the Gemara says. He wanted to tell them when Mashiach is coming. And what's the point of knowing when Mashiach is coming? The point is, it's a zeros. It's something that will energize them in their service of Hashem. So Rav Shach says, there's no point in prognosticating and predicting, right, it's coming. Now, the only toelas, only benefit of knowing when it's coming, thinking about what's coming, is this going to improve your service of Hashem? Look at number 8. The Rav Shach writes, Uvezeh, Masha Harambam Kasav, that which the Rambam writes, Shabashas Misasai Tzivam Bezirzam Al Yichar Hashem, that at the time of his death, Yaakov Avinu commanded him on God's oneness. Uva Gemara Isa, the Gemara says not like that. The Gemara says Shabikash Yaakov Legalis Lahem Ketz Hayamim Va'Kesef Mishnah Kan Omer Al Zeh. V'nireh Pasha, it says of Shach, it is quite obvious. Shekol Inyan Yedias HaKetz Ein Zeh Inyan B'fnei Atzmai. Knowing when Mashiach is coming has no inherent value. Mashinageh Lanu. It's not relevant to us. It has no relevance to our lives. We believe, Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shlema, I believe in complete faith it will come when the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, and even though it's been taking a long time, I believe it could come now. Does it make an nafkamina to predict and know exactly what it's going to be? No nafkamina. Says Rav Shach, the only nafkamina is Ela'ach v'rak sheyesh bazem ishum ziruz v'yichad Hashem la'avaydasa yirach. The only benefit of knowing when Mashiach is coming is it will be mizarez us in our service of Hashem. Ki ein shum nafkamina b'zeh yidiyasenu masayiyah. There's no nafkamina in terms of knowing when it's going to be. V'neman aleinu HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheyiyah masay sheyiyah b'Sinai. We can trust God; it will come when He wants. V'hatoeles b'yadiyazu leziros. The benefit of this knowledge is it's a zeros, it's a inspiration. The Alkin Kasav Rambam Stam, and therefore the Rambam writes, Stam Shetzivam Bezirzam Al Yichar Hashem. What now? The question Rav Shach wants to know is, but what was wrong with what the Gemara said? The Gemara says he wanted to tell them when Mashiach is coming. So why wouldn't the Rambam just copy over the words of the Gemara? What's was is schlecht with the words of the Gemara? The answer is, you know what's wrong? The Rambam is teaching you not to be someone who's predicting and prognosticating and figuring out when it will come. That's not what we should do. This is not a Yiddish zach.
What about all these rebbes now? And that Mashiach, it shows you that Mashiach is going to come this and this and this and this. How about all these guys that are doing it?
So it's a good thing you came today. Because we're going to see it's more than just rebbes. But some of the greatest luminaries who ever lived give exact predictions when Mashiach is going to come.
The time is already gone.
And another problem is all those dates have passed. Okay. So let's see. The Rambam wrote this precisely. To teach that one should not be a prognosticator. Ki yedias haketz ein ze inyan chashuv klal uklal. Predicting when Mashiach comes is insignificant. Elaha ikr, the main thing is hazira za Hashem. If it's going to awaken you to serve Hashem. Okay.
If you know for sure that Mashiach is coming 450 years from now, what's the zeros now? I'm not going to see it. If you think maybe it could be tomorrow, the uncertainty is what prompts you to
Okay.
If he predicts and he doesn't come,
we're going to have to get, but working together with what Rav Shach is saying. In other words, the Gemara says Yaakov Avinu wanted to say when Mashiach is coming, and the Rambam says he was mezarez them about Yichud Hashem. So the way Rav Shach is saying it is because knowing when Mashiach is coming is not important. The ikr, the main thing is if you're going to take something from there, if you're going to increase your service of Hashem. So if you would have asked me, then the Rambam should have said he was mezarez them in the service of Hashem. Why does the Rambam specifically say he was mezarez them about Yichud Hashem, of all the aspects of serving God? The Rambam should have said he was mezarez them and they're learning, they're davening, why dafka Yichud Hashem? So what Rabbi Yosef wanted to suggest was, based on something that we've mentioned before, that on the words Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, what does this pasuk mean? Right? We say this. Raise your hand if you've ever said this in your life. Shema Yisrael, right? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Anyone ever say that? Right? Rashi, ever hear Rashi? Rashi says, you know what these words mean? Shema Yisrael. Listen up, Jewish people. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem, who now is only our God, the Goyim don't accept him. Hashem Echad, the day will come that he'll be one over everyone. That's what the words mean. Shema Yisrael, listen, Herzachain. Hashem Elokeinu, right now, He's our God. One day, Hashem Echad, He'll be the one God over everyone. So according to that, what is the job of Mashiach? To bring to the world the concept of Hashem Echad. Yichud Hashem. So we can suggest that if the Rambam tells us, if the Gemara tells us that Yaakov Avinu was telling them when Mashiach was coming, he's telling them, when will the time come where Hashem will be Hashem Echad? That's what the Rambam writes. That he was Mazarez them on Yichud Hashem. Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is just the introduction to the juicy part. Okay, by the way, just halach l'maisa, right? We know, look at number 12, we say, in the Yud-Gimel Ikram of the Rambam, Ani mamin be'amunah shalema, right? I believe in complete faith, v'viyas HaMashiach, v'yaf al pi sheyisma me'ah, and even though it delays and it tarries and it's taken a long time, I hope it could come whenever it comes. I await for it any day. So, in the one of the newer volumes of the Igros Moshe, Rav Moshe got a question from his nephew, Rabbi Michal Feinstein, and the question is like this: when we hope Mashiach will come, are we hoping maybe he'll come, like 1%, 10%? What, what does it mean? It's like, I also hope I'm going to win the lottery, right? Is it the same type of thing? I go, I don't have enough to pay the bills. Maybe I'll buy a lottery ticket. I'm really hoping I'll win. Is that how we have to hope for Mashiach? I mean, when you buy the lottery ticket, do you really think you're going to win?
You gotta be in it to win it.
You got to be in it to win it. But once you're in it, do you really think you're going to win?
No.
Not really. 10%? So when we hope, when we believe Mashiach is coming, is it more or less than the lottery? What kind of hope do we have to have? Says Rav Moshe, something very interesting.
Don't we, in part, control when Mashiach comes? If there has to be a certain
we'll have to get to that. Maybe
shop or whatever you want to say, that before Mashiach can come, the parameters, the environment has to be appropriate.
So he's
So
waiting for us.
our actions, in part, determine when Mashiach is going to come. So it's not just a hope, it's that your hope has to be translated into your own personal action.
Okay, the Gemara discusses what are the circumstances on which Mashiach will come. Some of the Gemara says the generation is kulei zakai, everyone's virtuous, or kulei chayev, everyone's unworthy. It's unclear, but there's definitely a concept that, ready or not, Mashiach says, here I come. So Rav Moshe writes something very interesting.
This philosophy,
Yeah, I didn't say it yet. I didn't say the philosophy yet.
is that kula chayev or kula zakai?
Yeah.
It should be kula zakai. It's impossible. Somebody will spoil it. The kula chayev, if you don't chayev, so Mashiach cannot come because the world is held on the Lamadu Tzadikim.
So it may mean the good people are kulei zakai, the bad people are kulei chayev. Okay, but look what Rav Moshe writes. Rav Moshe says that he says like this. Look on the next Unakayim, the paragraph that starts Unakayim. Unakayim gam mitzvahs Pesach. He's writing this before the Yontif of Pesach. Maybe Mashiach will come. We'll be Mekayim the mitzvahs of Pesach. Afim betuma uvesheshus yamim oid lekayim riya v'chagiga v'simcha b'shlamim, and perhaps in another 6 days we still have an opportunity to fulfill the other kavanos u'v'nevuas Malachi, like the prophecy of Malachi. What does Malachi say? Asher pisayim yavai el heichalai ha'adain asher atem mevakshim. Right? You thought it was just a Shweki song. No, the Navi Malachi said it. Pisaim yavai ha'adain el heichalai asher atem mevakshim. Suddenly, God will return to His palace, the one you're seeking. Rav Moshe says, what does it mean, suddenly? You know what suddenly means? Even though nobody predicted it, and there's nothing special about that day. People say, "Oh, this Shavuos, it's the first time that Shabbos and Shavuos, the whole thing, right? This is Mesugo for Mashiach." No, Rabbi says, Pisaim. It could come suddenly without any sign, without any unusual event, indication, pointing that this should be the appropriate time for it to come. All the various predictions have passed. Whenever it comes, it will be suddenly. We have no specific reason to think it will come today as opposed to a different time. And therefore, mitzad emunasenu hatahira yachal lavai b'chol rega v'rega, through our pure faith, it could come at any moment. Says Rav Moshe, the chiyuv to anticipate Mashiach is more than just a suffix. This implies she'ika chiyuv l'tzapos. There's an obligation to yearn yoiser mechashiva suffix, more than just 50-50, because the Gemara tells us that even though, right, that when is the Chadash Mutter? When you bring what? On the second day of Pesach? When you bring the Karban Omer. But what about when there's no Beis HaMikdash? So Midarai, so you're allowed to eat the Chadash sunrise. Mishaher Pnei Mizrach. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, no. Mehero Yibana Beis HaMikdash, maybe Mashiach will be built immediately, and people are going to remember that last year we ate it sunrise, and this year when we're able to bring a carbon, they're going to mistakenly start eating Chadash sunrise. So because Mashiach might come, we have to say, no, you can't eat the Chadash the whole day. I mean, come on. Because Mashiach might come, what are the chances he's coming? He didn't come for the last 500,000 days. What's the chance he's coming today?
Same thing with Hilchos Shabbos.
Yeah.
The Chazal was worried, you can't ride a horse because one person might sometime break off a twig.
That happens.
No, very rarely. No.
Mashiach happens even less than very rarely.
I have to pick another one.
Right? Mashiach doesn't happen that often. Right? So Ramesh says, must be
The same concept.
that this is not some far-fetched possibility. That it's our obligation to hope it's coming. Not it might come. It is coming. Look what he writes. Elohu mishum dehachiyuv b'chol yoim v'yoim letzapos ke'ein vadai sheyavoy hayoim. Says Moshe Feinstein, there's an obligation every day to anticipate almost for sure it's going to come today. Okay. So on the one hand, we have an obligation to yearn and hope Mashiach is coming when? Right now. Right now. Maybe it's coming. Maybe it's here. And on the other hand, do we have any idea when it's coming? We have no clue when it's coming. Look back at number 10.
But human nature makes it virtually, in my mind, impossible to be able to implement what Rav Moshe is saying. Because if you have an obligation to feel Mashiach is coming any minute, and he doesn't come, and then he doesn't come, and then he doesn't come, and then he doesn't come, human nature reduces your ability for that expectation.
But if God gave us this
How do you
command,
expect somebody to
and He
do that?
created us, that means we can. That means we have the ability to do it. That means we have that ability. So on the one hand, Rabbi said this is just intro. This is just intro. On the one hand, we have to hope, and almost for sure that Mashiach will come, and on the other hand, we have no idea when it's coming. Look at number 10. At the end of Sefer Daniel, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Daniel, V'ata Daniel, Sisoim hadvarim, obscure the matter, Bachasoim, seal it, Ades Kates, till the end of days. Yeshoitetu Rabbim, many people will muse and think about it. V'sir Bahadas, and the opinions will increase. Says in Mitzudas David, Sisoim hadvarim, Af hamaat sheyadat b'divrei hanavuahi. Even the little Daniel that you do know, kisvein b'dvarim stumim uvermazim. Write it in an ambiguous, unclear, cryptic type of way. B'chasom, and seal it. In other words, nobody's going to know. Even the little you know, Write it in a way that no one will have any clue what you're talking about. So on the one hand, we have this dichotomy. We have this dichotomy that we're obligated to anticipate it's coming almost for sure. And on the other hand, we have absolutely no idea when it's coming, because even the one person who knew it momentarily and then it was hidden from him, the way Daniel recorded it's completely incomprehensible.
Bitochon. If you know for sure it's coming, that's bitochon. You have bitochon. And Munah, you have to have faith. It's a different...
By the way, the Rambam writes that someone who doesn't believe in Mashiach, he's not just a kaifer in the words of the prophets, he's a kaifer b'divrei Taras Maisha. He denies the Torah itself. The Rambam understands that Mashiach is commanded in the Chumash itself, but that's another topic for another day. So what we want to know is, if we are obligated to anticipate... Yeah, that's what the Rambam writes.
Yes, Martin, how are you?
So on the one hand, we have this dichotomy.
I think so. Sheila will be in touch with you. Okay.
On the one hand, we're obligated to anticipate when Mashiach is coming, and on the other hand, we have no idea when it's coming. Are we allowed to predict? Turn over your sheets to number 14. The Gemara tells us in the Masechta Sanhedrin, right? Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis, Amar Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. Shmuel Bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, Tipach Atzman Shel Mechashvei Kitzin. Let the bones of the prognosticators swell up. They should be cursed. The Gemara gives us an Isser to try to predict when Mashiach is coming. Those who make such predictions, Tipach Atzman, their bones should swell up. In fact, the Rambam tells us, number 15, Amru Chachamim, the sages have told us, Ein bein ha'olam hazeh limos ha'Mashiach ela shibud malchios bavad. There is no difference between this world and when Mashiach comes, except for the shibud malchios. We will not be subjugated by the government. We won't have to pay the income tax, the federal tax, Social Security. Right? We won't be under the subjugation of the malchus. Says the Rambam, what exactly is the order of events? What comes first? Mashiach, Muchemas Gog uMagog, Eliyahu Hanavi, Binyan Beis Hamikdash. What's the order? They skip a couple of lines. Says the Rambam. Does anybody know? V'chol elu hadvarim u'kiyoytzu behen loy yada adam heich yiyu achayu. All of these things. The way Mashiach is going to come, how he's going to come, what he's going to look like, what kind of donkey he's going to ride. Is it going to be a Lexus, a Acura, Toyota? What kind of, right? We don't know these things. When is Muchemas Gog uMagog? When is Binyan Beis Hamikdash? When is Eliyahu? What's the order? Nobody knows until they happen. Lo yada adam heich yiyu achayu. What do you mean? Did the Nevi'im know? She'advarim stumin heimetzel hanavim. Even the prophets didn't know. It was confusing even to them. Gam hachachamim ein lahem kabbalah b'dvar meilu. Even the sages of the Gemara don't have a clear tradition. Elo lefi hechra psukim. They try to explain the psukim in different avenues. Ulefikach yesha machloikis b'dvar meilu, and that's why there's dispute. V'al kalpanim, says the Rambam, ein sidur havayas dvarim elu v'loy diktukan ikar b'das. How these things are going to take place. The way Mashiach is going to come. When's Muchemas Gog uMagog? When's Eliyahu? Who's Eliyahu? What does he look like? When's the Binyan Beis Hamikdash? These are not fundamental ideas in Judaism. Not important to know. Don't get involved in learning about it. Don't learn in a lengthy way the different agaritas about these things. This should not be your focus. You know why? Says the Rambam, just like Rav Shach said, She'enon mevi'in lo lidei ava v'lo lidei yira. It doesn't bring you any closer to God to know exactly when's Muchemas Gog uMagog. Is it before Mashiach, after Mashiach? When is the Binyan Beis Hamikdash? Before Eliyahu, after Eliyahu? How is Eliyahu going to build the Beis Hamikdash? We're all tamei. These things are not fundamental ideas in Judaism.
Is this contradictory of Moshe in this answer? Moshe said you have to think every minute of Mashiach.
Every minute we think it's coming. How it's going to come. When it's going to come. Exactly the details. And figuring out how to reconcile this Gemara with that Gemara, with the Mechemes Gog and Magog, and the order of things. This is not a focus. And then this is what we're getting to. V'chein lo yachshev hakitzin. Do not contemplate and calculate when Mashiach is coming. Amru chachamim tipuach daiton shamachashve kitzin. Let their mind swell up. Ela yichake v'yamin b'chal hadavar k'may shamar b'yanu. You wait and you believe it's going to come. So we have clear from the Gemara and the Rambam, we should not predict when Mashiach is coming. But either we could go home, or we could predict when Mashiach is coming, right? Now you say, but the Rambam just told us we're not allowed to. But on the other hand, we find there is literally a grocery list of Gedolei Olam who predict the exact year Mashiach is coming. To begin with, Rav Sadia Gaon, Rashi, the Ramban, Rabbeinu Ephraim, Rishonim, Paneach Roza.
In finite years and according
in
to
finite years, Arizal.
So you all listen to the Rambam.
Arizal. The Malbim.
How come it isn't common knowledge?
The Malbim.
How come it isn't common knowledge what those years are?
Very common. Those who know, yeah.
Was that the year 6000?
So, the first question is, how are these Gedolim allowed to violate the Gemara? The Gemara
They
says...
all like the Rambam.
The Gemara says, Tipach Atzma Shamakash Vekitzin. Let their bones swell up. That's a question. What are these Gedolim? Number two, why did they do it? Number three, they were all wrong. Okay. So Rabbi say, we're going to, just for the sake of, at least once in a life, learning a little bit in Sefer Daniel, we're just to learn a little bit what Rashi's prediction is. And maybe a little from the Malbim. By the way, the Rashi's prediction was that Mashiach is going to come 515 years ago. The year 1497. The Malbim predicted Mashiach will come in the year Taf Reish Ayin Gimel, 1913.
Those are very interesting dates.
And the Mayim say Kitzur Yomim is this year.
What was 1497? 5 years
It was
after
5
Columbus
years
discovered America.
No, it was 5 years after the expulsion of the Jews from Spain.
The significance of 5 years.
1913 was just before
World War
War.
I.
Now, Rabbi Say, part of why I want to do this, because I want to show and illustrate a little bit how obscure, in Daniel it says straight out when it's coming, in the Pasuk.
Let's learn it.
Let's learn it. But you'll see how obscured it is and how cryptic it is. Okay, look at number 16. Okay, this is a Pasuk in Sefer Daniel. Umilin and words, Litzad Ilah, against the Supreme One, Yamala. He will speak. What are the words and who's the he? Ulikadishe Elyonim, Yevale. And against the high holy ones, he will exhaust. V'yizbar, and he will plan. Lehashnoya, to change. Zimnin, seasons. V'das, and law. V'yis yahavon bidei, and they will be given in his hand. Until when? Okay, you ready for the date when Mashiach is coming? Okay, but you won't tell anyone. Ad idan v'idanin ufilag idan. Until a time, 2 times, and a half a time. Okay, you got that? Mashiach is coming in a time, 2 times, and a half a time. That's when Mashiach's coming.
So he doesn't say when.
We got to figure out the gematria.
No, now you need to know, what does a time mean? You'll know that once you know, the key here is, what is a time? If a time is 500 years, so Mashiach is coming in 500 years, and then in 2 times 1,000 years, and then in a half a time. So if a time is 500 years, then Mashiach is coming in 1,750 years.
So why
a time,
just
2
say
times?
1,750 years?
Because they don't want you to know.
They don't want the regular people to know. They only want us, to be able to figure it out.
1,250.
Count?
Well, 1 time is 500 plus 2 times is another 1,000, right? Idan, then Idanin, and Ufalag Idan.
What about the first Ad? That doesn't count?
Until Ad, meaning
Idan, it's the same show.
no. Ad is meaning basically the world will be under the dominion of this creep. Ad Idan, until a time. Ad there means okay.
How do you know it's 1,000?
I don't know.
This is an example.
So now Rashi, and all the Rishonim conjecture. What is the time? That we say a time, 2 times, and a half a time. Or you could read the pasuk a little bit differently. It will come at Idan, at a time. What's the time? The time is Idan and Uflag Idan, 2 times and a half a time. In other words, is it at Idan v'Idan and Uflag Idan? A time, 2 times and a half time, or Aridan, here, until a time, which is 2 times and then a half a time.
But that doesn't mean anything until we know what the time is.
Right.
So Rabbi say,
1 year, 100 years, 1,000 years, 1,500 years.
So Rabbi say, how about we read Rashi? What do you say?
That's a good idea.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol neh mevareh.
Amen.
That's what Rashi said.
He must have said something.
Okay. Ad Idan, look at number 17. Ad Idan v'idanin ufalag Idan. Kates sasam, who's that? This is a obscured end. Ka'asher nemer Daniel, like Hashem told Daniel, right? Hashem said, Daniel, don't write the year 2050. Right? Write it obscured. Sisoim hadvarim, obscure the matter, v'chasom. V'darshuhu harishainim ish lefi daita. Says Rashi, all the earlier authorities, this is Rashi talking, he's saying, all the earlier authorities explain this pasuk according to their opinion. V'kalu akitzim, and all of these ends have passed. So Rashi says, if they've all passed, so we have to try again to try to explain this pasuk. B'yesh lanu l'paisari oid. We have to interpret it further. Ka'asher ra'isi kasav b'shem Rav Sadia. Like I saw it written in the name of Rav Sadia, Haim Elef ve'gimel me'os ve'lamed hishanim ha'amor b'soif ha'sefer ashrei ha'machaka. Okay, here's another important thing. At the very end of Sefer Daniel, take a look, Rabbi Isai, in number 22. The end of Sefer Daniel gives you a different date. Here it says, Ad Idan, until a time, V'idanin, and 2 times, Uflag Idan, and a half a time. At the end of Daniel it says, Ashrei HaMechakev Yagia, fortunate is one who awaits and reaches Liyamim, Elef, 1,000 years, Shloish Meos, 300 years, Shloishim, 30 years, Bechamisha, and 5.
No. Where do you see the word year? The Gila Yamin. Elo Shlosh Meir Shloshim Chamisha. No word Shana there.
Yamin means year. Yamin means years over there. Yamin refers to years.
How many days were the days of creation? 6, but they weren't days as we know them.
Okay, there Yamin means years. So there the pasuk is saying, Rabbi Isai, after how many years will Mashiach come? After 1,035.
Of what? From where?
From when?
and then number 19 you have 2,300.
What?
In number 19 it says Vayomer Erev Boker Alpayim Shlosh Meos.
Right, and number 19 it says 2,300. So how do we deal with this? And this pasuk says a time, 2 times, a half a time. So look at this. Upeirosh hamoyed.
Where are you reading now?
Back in Rashi, the explanation of the time
Back to 17.
is ad eis shnei itim. In other words, Rashi reads like this: Ad idan, Mashiach will come by the time. What's the time? Idanin uplagidan, 2 times and a half a time. Ade shnei itim, until a time of 2 times. V'chatziyes, and then a half a time. The Amar and Rav Sadi Gaon said, Sheha'itim heim daled me'os, that the times are 400. Uperosh shemiyam tzeisa mi Mitzrayim ad shenivne habayis, from the time they left Mitzrayim until the Beis Hamikdash was built. The Daled Meos, the Eser, Yemei, Mikdash, Rishon, Hare, Taf Tzadi. That's 890.
So 890 is 1 time or 2 times?
What in the world does that mean? What's 890? 890 is
2 times 445.
Over the end of the bias region.
from the time we left Mitzrayim until the Beis Hamikdash was built was how long?
890?
480 years. 480 years. How do you get that? 40 years in the desert and 440 years in Eretz Yisrael before the Beis Hamikdash was built. So the first time is a period of 480 years. The second
Built or
time,
destruction? Is it built?
until it was built. The second time is the 410 years that the first Beis Hamikdash stood. So when it says it will take until times, the times referring to are the time from when we left Mitzrayim until we built the Beis Hamikdash, and the second time is the amount of time the first Beis Hamikdash stood. A total of 890.
But each time is a different number.
Right.
So it's not...
It's until times. When in Jewish history were there 2 times? From leaving Mitzrayim until Binyan Beis Hamikdash, then from Binyan Beis Hamikdash until the Churban, that's 890 years. And then, when the end of the pasuk says, and a half a time, the half a time refers to half of the 890. That's 445. What's 890 and 445?
1335.
1335, which is exactly what it says at the end of Daniel. You gotta wait till 1,335 years for Mashiach to come. So we've uncoded the code. We've discovered what Daniel means. He says in the end 1,335. He says times and a half a time. The times and a half a time, it fit in perfectly what it says in the end. 1 second. Look what let's just finish the Rashi. Va'od chatzi ha'es hazeh taf mem hei harei elef shin lamed hei es eila chashoiv. This you have to calculate from when? From when? If you look at the end of Daniel, from the time the carbon tamid was abolished in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, chashov me'es husar tamid. Calculate from the time in history that the carbon tamid was removed ad shuv zavach hatamid el mekamer until carbonis will be brought again. Now, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed when 890 years after we left Mitzrayim. But when did the carbon tamid stop being brought? 6 years before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And the Rashi says there are rayas to this. So basically, Mashiach will come 1,335 years after the carbon tamid stopped being brought in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash. Now, let's figure out when Mashiach is coming. We have the exact date. What year was the Beis Hamikdash destroyed?
586. 586 when it was established, right?
Which one? The first?
First.
Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah.
586.
You mean what date from Brias HaOlam?
In the Jewish, in the secular calendar, what date was Beis Hamikdash?
Which one? First?
Established?
No, destroyed.
First or the second?
First?
Yeah, the second one was the first one.
The second one was
About
17.
600 BC.
No, it's 2870 AD was destroyed the second. Go back 420. So it's like 350. No?
Oh, you
Back
put these to that.
420 plus
And that's
70.
70.
And
420.
No,
Then 70.
70 is 420.
Yeah.
420 BCE. Now,
That's when it was destroyed?
I thought it was, what was 586? 586 BC
Yeah,
is
because
either
of the
destroyed or established.
70 AD we know is that's definitely the second destruction.
These 2 dates.
So add 420 to it, because it stood 10 years longer than the first one, right?
It's 350.
So it's 350. And then it was 70 years between the first and the second.
It's 420.
Oh.
Okay, so now we're saying, if you calculate 1,335 years from then, from 6 years before, 6 years before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash.
426 BCE.
No, that's like 9, the year 900 or something.
No. 426 BC is when the carbon tumid was stopped.
Okay, so 1,300 years, 1,335 years later.
35 minus 426.
Yeah.
It's 900 or something.
900, yeah.
Fast.
Okay. By the way,
it's assuming that the ace is, that's what the ace really meant.
That was past even in the time of Rashi.
that was earlier even than the time of Rashi.
Rashi lived till 1,000.
Rashi's not
something.
1100.
They died about 1104 or
Oh. However, Rabbi Say,
What they say.
when we say from the time that the Talmud was Me'ez Husar HaTalmud, it may not mean the Talmud of the first Beis HaMikdash. It may mean the Talmud of the second Beis HaMikdash. Now, when was the second Beis HaMikdash destroyed?
70. This
secular calendar.
70. Not everybody agrees to that, by the way. The Seder Hadoros writes it was 168 of the Common Era.
All right, so we're playing with 100 years.
So that's what the Seder Hadoros writes. Which, according to that, is probably going with Rashi's calculation, because presumably Rashi is predicting a date that didn't happen yet. If you make that, if you say that the first Beis Hamikdash, second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in 168, and that means the Talmud stopped being brought in the year 162, so then Mashiach would be coming
1335 is 1497.
1497. That's what they say that Rashi's prediction was, 1497. Okay. By the way, says Rashi, I'll bring you a raya to this, because it says in the Chumash, Va'anoichi haster aster, says Rashi, the gematria of haster aster is 1,335, like it says at the end of Daniel. Okay. And this would fit into this cheshbon of Idan, Idanin, Uplag Idan. Idanin is 2 times, which is 890. A half a time is 445. Also, that fits in with 1335. I'll give you a little illustration, Rabbi Isai, of the way the Malbim learns this pasuk. Okay? Remember, this way of learning the pasuk is reading it like this. Ad Idan, Mashiach will come at the time. What's the time? Idanim, Uflagidan. But we said in the beginning, you could read it differently. You could read it Ad Idan v'idan and Uflagidan. A time, 2 times, and then a half a time. Now if you add in Idan as another 400 something years, that will get you up from 1497 to the 1900s.
Not 1913, that's probably good to 1913.
So let's look at the Malbim. The Malbim says, well, we've only been explaining the end of the pasuk. What about the beginning of the pasuk? So the beginning of the pasuk, it's talking about some guy, he's casting words against God, and he will speak against the High One, and he's going to change religion. Who's that talking about?
Issue.
So the Malbim learns it's talking about Muhammad. Look at number 18.
That was 700.
620, 627.
722.
Okay, look what it says. During the times of religious persecution. Anybody know what Keren Zeira is?
Small.
The small horn. What's that?
Crescent, the
Crescent?
The Muslim crescent is a horn like a horn.
That's your homework. When the small crescent... What?
Yeah, tell them.
I don't know. When the Navi HaYishmaelim got up, Kalu Kama Tzadikim Kedosh Elyon, there were no more Tzadikim. V'yizbar Lahashi Zmanim Edas. Shemachama Nosein Das HaYishmaelim Shinas Hadasos. This Muhammad guy tried to change religions. V'heveres HaMayados. V'yishavon Bidei Ad Idan. V'idanin Upelag Idan. Says the Malbim. This is completely ambiguous. What is this talking about? If it gave a day without telling you a time, it has to be referring to some kind of specific time. Either the time referred to here is the 400 years of Galus Mitzrayim, or 410 years of the first base of Mikdash. B'chein pirish chazav v'chol hakadmonim. Rak shehem pirishu plagidan chatzi zman me arba me'ois ami taf yud shana u'lefizeh kolu kol hakitzim. According to them, all the times have passed. V'ha'emesu shepirish plagidan chatzi zman hakol shalidan v'idanim. When it says plagidan, it's going on. If you add up Idan, the one time, and the two times together, if you add all these three times together, the Plag Idan is half of that. So let's put it into math. Says the Malbim. Let's say Idan, the time referring to is 400 years. So it would be 400, plus 2 times 800, that's 1200. Plus another what? 200. Plus another half of that whole thing is 600, 1800. And then the Mashiach would come in the year V'yageh Azman B'shnas Tafresh Chav Ches 16. That would be 1868. Somehow, for some reason, he's counting from the year 68 of the Common Era. Maybe that's what?
Closer to 70. Korban. 6 years before the Talmud was stopped, does he hold from that far?
This is counting from the Churban Beis HaMikdash by Sheni. Shaz Yichlu Ches Yud Meo Shana Mizman Churban Bais Kosher Aydei Romiyah. But the problem is, this date doesn't fit into other dates. Now, I don't know what the year 68 got to do with Muhammad. When did Muhammad come?
No, 600.
600.
So I don't know who this Muhammad guy, who this Yishmaeli guy is, who came in the year 68. But he says, Umuchrach sha'idan hu taf yud shana. The time given is not 400 years, it's 410. Kizman amidas bayis rishon. So what would 3 times be? 410 times 3 is 1230. So shloish yidan meim elef reish lamed shana, and so that's 1230. What's a half a time? 615. What's 1230 and 615?
1845.
1845 plus 68 from the time the Beis was destroyed. 1913. Now, by the way, I just want to point out, obviously we're not allowed to do this, but if we go according to the Seder Hadoros, who calculated and said the Beis HaMikdash being destroyed in 68, it was at 168, it wouldn't be like the Malbim says 1913, it would be 2013. But obviously we can't say anything. Okay.
Wait a minute. I read a prediction that something's going to happen in December 2000.
Not from us.
That's the Mayans. That's the Mayans.
Okay. But that's what the Malbim says.
Oh, yeah? I don't remember where it was from.
December 21st.
So that would be the year 615. That would be another 615, right? 1230 plus 615. Sachakol elef shmoina meyos mem shana v'yagia zman haketz b'shnas taf reish ayin gimel 1913. And this is mentioned again. He wrote this in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
19th century.
Was that past also?
19th.
Oh yeah, no kidding. What do you mean it passed?
His time also?
No, right, in his lifetime.
Unless you do it in the other one.
2013.
168.
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from. That's what the Seder Hadorah says. So,
Why?
Yeah, what?
I'm curious about the Seder Hadoros, how they figured that. Of course, there's a lost time span. Rabbi from Washington Heights, what's his name? Schwab. He wrote a treatise on it. I have it somewhere in the house.
But that there's missing time in history?
Missing time, I know. That the secular versus the Jewish times, it's about 168 years for missing.
Here we're saying there's about 100 years. Okay. So Rabbi say,
Rabbi, who says that the Egon and the Egonim are 410, 420, maybe it's 890? Maybe it's 1/8 is the entire time from the Bayis Sheni to the Bayis Rishon to the Bayis Sheni.
Maybe what?
If you do that calculation, we come up to 2295 if we assume that 70 was a destruction. Do that calculation.
Wow, what's your calculation?
If you take 890 years,
yeah,
that's the total time.
That's the way Rashi did it. Idanim.
Right? So if Edon is 890, Edonim is twice 890, right? 2 times 890, and a half is 445.
Well, that's
going to come up to 2,225 years, and if it counted from the destruction of the second base, I make that just 2295. So we won't be around.
That's also after the year 6000.
Anyone can come up with his own calculation.
Yeah.
Again.
What is the time frame?
Exactly.
Everything is based
I'm
upon
just
that.
giving you just an illustration of how obscured and cryptic the information is. I'll give you one more example, and we're not going to have time to read every date over here. But look at number 19. We have another date in Daniel. It says, "Vayomer Elai ad erev," until evening, boiker and morning. Alpayim v'shlosh me'os, 2,300. 2,300 what?
30 days.
2,300 what?
Erev Boker, 1 day.
So,
What does Rashi say on this?
what does Rashi say? You want to learn the Rashi?
Long Rashi.
Rashi ends up saying it's 2,300.
How does Rashi fit all these days?
From the time that when we exiled Mitzrayim. What year did we leave? When we let out of Mitzrayim? In other words, from the time we were let out of Mitzrayim. So let's calculate. You have 40 years in the Midbar, and then 440 years in Eretz Yisrael before the Beis Hamikdash was built. So that's 480 plus 410. That's what? 890 plus 70 years. 960 plus 420.
1380.
1380.
Someone asked me what I learned today. I'll say we were trying to figure out
Numbers you learn. Numbers. That's why Bamidbar.
Oh, that's why I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
On numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get it too.
Then add to that, Rabbi Say.
After 1380.
Add to 1380 the date that it says at the end of Daniel, where it says Elef Masayim B'Tishim, 1,290. What do you get?
1670.
No. You're adding 1,290.
Yeah, and
plus the date that I just said. The 890 plus 70. 960 plus the 420.
1380.
What's 1380 and 1290?
2670.
2670. That's the pasuk. The Rashi learns out. 26. This pasuk of. Excuse me for a moment. Alpayim. So 2,300 plus the gematria of the words Erev Biker. Okay. In other words, you're just getting a little bit of a taste that this is not something that is quite apparent even to Rashi. And even so, Rabbi Sai, we're going to learn that almost all these Gedolim have given precise predictions. So the questions we want to we'll deal with after the break is, number 1, how are they allowed to predict? The Gemara says, Tipach Atzman. Number 2, why did they do it? And number 3, how could they be wrong?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.